Her commitment to her husband was truly astounding. He was healthy and a highly successful country music star when they fell in love. But after she married him, he was incapacitated by a stroke. Life would never be the same. But instead of leaving, instead of giving up, their amazing love story only grew stronger. He is one of the most beloved country music artists of all times, Randy Travis. He has sold over 25 million albums, a member of the Country Music Hall of Fame and the Grand Ole Opry. His honors include 22 #1 hits and 31 top 10 songs, 7 Grammy Awards, 11 Academy Country Music Awards, and the list goes on and on. But his life changed drastically when he encountered a near-fatal stroke in 2013. But with the help of his beautiful wife, Mary, and rigorous physical therapy, Randy continues to change the world with his music and faith. This is their story of unshakable love and faith, forever and ever, amen. This is today's Nashville. This is faith. Randy, Mary, what a blessing to me that I get to sit down and get to share your amazing story of love and faith. I read your book and I couldn't put it down. But you know, before we start and talk about everything, Mary, I wanted you to share one of the challenges that you face as you guys are walking through this journey of faith, and the topic about aphasia. I'm a nurse, I know what it means, but a lot of our viewers, they don't understand it.
Well, the interesting thing is, and I didn't understand it either until we went through it. And when I think back on the last words that we spoke, now I'm going to call the beginning of this, but the last words we spoke was, they were getting ready to do a surgical procedure on him, and I had to step out of the room. They were putting an impella in to help assist the heart, since the heart was failing. And the last words that we got to speak was, "Honey, I love you, I'll be right outside." And he said, "I love you too." And I think I treasure those words that we got to speak in our last conversation. That was 8 years ago this month. 8
years.
Fast forward, well, not too far forward, but then after the stroke, it was 72 hours after he flatlined, which was during this procedure that they were doing. And he was in a coma, so they had not recognized the stroke. And so it was too late for the stroke prevention medicine and things. So it had done its damage, but you know, sometimes there's so much beauty in the damage. And the aphasia was the biggest aftermath that we had to deal with. I would say even more so than the paralysis on the right side is the aphasia, because it's so misunderstood.
Well, explain it. What is aphasia?
Aphasia it's the certain part of the brain that is affected by the stroke. Every stroke is different. Every result is different from a stroke. And so you run into people all the time, and they've had a stroke, and they say, and they can talk, and they just like, well, keep going. You can eventually. We don't know. We don't. Every stroke is different, and every outcome is different. 85% of the world, the population, doesn't know what aphasia is, and it is more prevalent than multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's. There's so many maladies that we are familiar with. But not aphasia, and it's more prominent, and it happens to more people every year than those. So,
and it's really the inability to communicate. You understand everything and know everything, but it's to get your thoughts out.
That's exactly right.
And to express your thoughts, right?
An interruption in the brain, between the brain and the mouth, the motor senses that that allow us to speak and put sentences together. His was the left side cerebral ischemic stroke, and so that's where the speech patterns are for forming sentences. And that's totally different than the memory side, which is on the right side, and that's why he can still mouth every word to every song, because that's memory. That's in the memory bank. So the left side that was affected in that central part is what affects the ability to put together sentences in any more than 3 to 4 words at a time.
Right.
And
So that's why if somebody sees you in an interview and you're talking, that's what's happening. Yeah. It's just the inability to put those thoughts together.
Right. I mean, I would much rather he be telling you these stories.
I know you said beforehand that you were the quiet one, that you were always talking. And, but let's go back a little bit before we talk about your journey as a couple and talk about your success. You are one of the most beloved country music artists of all time. And everyone just loves Randy Travis. And can you share, Mary, some of the memories that you have? Because you have known each other a very long time, you know, when he was rising to stardom. Right. It was a journey. I know that everybody thinks that it's an overnight success.
No.
But
no.
It wasn't, was it?
No, he worked hard at it. He fashioned his skill. He knew exactly where he wanted to go with it. I think he said since the age of 9, 10, he knew that he wanted to do traditional country, and he never veered from that. He had a focus, and he and Lib, they built a path, you know, that it was magical, and he had hard times as a youngster.
Oh, I read his book, kind of a rebel there.
Yeah, he was a rebel, and he had, you know, kind of the beautiful family, and all 6 kids are still with us, and Mom and Dad are both gone, but he had struggles with his dad, and very rebellious, and but he overcame all that. That's the beauty of it. That's the redemption, is to look back and say, that's not where I want to be. That's not the person I want to be. So he is the kindest, sweetest. Every word in his songs are Randy Travis, from the heart.
Do you know which is your favorite song?
Oh, nope.
Oh, you don't know? What's special for you, Mary?
The last one I heard. Yeah. I love them all.
Do you? Mm-hmm. What was the last song that you heard?
Well, our love song is "Are We in Trouble Now?" Yeah. It's a beautiful love song of his. So, and not very well known, but it is absolutely beautiful.
Well, you know, after airing this, everybody's going to be Googling it, you know, finding out what...
It's beautiful.
But your love story started years ago, and you knew each other, and God has taken you through an amazing journey. And share a little bit about that, just, you know, when you first met, and Mary, did you know right away when?
Well, I knew how fond I was of the person, of the heart. And we had met 30 years ago. I mean, 30 now. It was in 1990. So what is it? 31 years now. And I was working with my brother, who was making shirts, the stub shirts that he wore. And he would pass through town, he and Lib, and so I knew them only from business and social. I mean, we would go to dinner, and so we spent time together. But watching him day in and day out, when I was around him, was that humility. Here's this monster of a man as far as the country phenomena, that I just thought he was a prince of a person. He was so kind to everyone he ever met. He was so gentle and so humble, and there's something you love about that. He treated everyone the same. I wasn't going to not fall in love with him when I had the chance. And that came 20-some years later.
Randy, Mary, God had an amazing journey and a different path for your life. Let's talk about that time when you fell in love, you were touring, you were back on the stage, just going. God brought you guys together. So let's talk about when that happened, and then we'll talk more about what happened.
It was March of 2010, and we were both going through some divorces, and we spoke and met, and we never looked back. I mean, it was just, it was something so magical, so wonderful, so quickly, that there was, we know that it was in His plan, and we never know where He's going to take us.
So you knew right away once you started talking?
Right, that March 10th of 2010, I knew right away.
So what happened after that?
Well, we
started a courtship? And
yes, and that went on for about 3 years. We got engaged in 2013, actually, and the stroke occurred it was July, first week in July 6th, 7th of 2013. So
almost 8 years?
It was 8 years this
You know
year.
what, let's talk about that day. You know, you hear all kinds of, you know, rumors and stuff, but let's really talk what happened about, you were touring, correct? And you were, a virus, or you were ill, or?
It was,
or
he just didn't feel good.
Yeah.
He said we were leaving the following Tuesday for Canada, 2 weeks in Canada. And we had a long meeting all day on a Saturday. It was right after the 4th of July. And we had a long meeting with some folks from Nashville there at the house in Tioga, Texas, where we live. And he said, I don't feel real good, I can't breathe good. The day before, he'd worked out 3 hours. I mean, he was a workout. He loved working out. So, but he said, I don't feel it. And he never complained about not feeling good, because he took such good care of his body. So I said, well, let's go to the emergency room and see what's going on, if it's pneumonia or whatever it is, because he said he couldn't breathe. They said, well, it's walking pneumonia, and they gave us, a breathing treatment and an antibiotic and sent us home. Well, the next morning he woke up and he said, I can't breathe, I can't get any air at all. And I said, that's really strange. So we went back to the hospital. He had double pneumonia. Both lungs were full.
Didn't admit you.
I know. Well, I think that they just figured if it was, what they didn't know, though, it was not the lungs, it was the heart. There was viral cardiomyopathy. There was a virus that hit the heart. And so the heart was shutting down. And that's another awareness thing that I want people to understand, is when the heart is stressing, then the lungs start stressing. And you know this as a nurse. And vice versa.
Everything starts backing up.
Yes, and if people have pneumonia and they're admitted for pneumonia, somebody needs to be watching that heart, because the heart's going to stress too. They work so hand in hand.
Were they watching the heart then?
Not at all. Not until we got to the third hospital, which was the heart hospital.
So you went 3 hospitals.
Yeah, quickly though. It's not like it was time. You know, it wasn't days. We're talking hours here. So we ended up at the heart hospital at 5 o'clock in the morning, and Dr. Michael Mack met us there. And he said, we have to put him on ECMO or we're going to lose him. And after 72 hours, brought him out of the coma to find that he had flatlined when he had, that he had stroked when he flatlined.
Now,
and they
he
brought him
did
back.
cardiac arrest.
Yeah.
And that's, and you had just walked out the room, correct? And you weren't there when it happened.
Well, they were going to do the Impella procedure to assist the heart. That was, and when they started to do the Impella procedure is when he flatlined. So yes, I had just walked out of the room so that they could do this procedure. They didn't want me in there.
I think God was protecting you, so you wouldn't even, wouldn't see that part. I can't imagine being in the room when
and
that
watching,
happened.
I know. Yeah,
So tell me
I
about...
wasn't going to give up hope, and maybe that was God's way of saying, no, you're not going to believe
Well,
that
you know what? I remember you saying that one of the doctors wanted to do something, and you said, no, we're not doing that. I can't remember what it was, but do you recall that?
Well, it was when we were then at the 4th hospital, which was Vanderbilt, and he had relapsed. There was other complications.
Oh, it was during the rehab.
No, it was, well, we came here for rehab, but he ended up, well, they said he had food inhalation, but it ended up being serratia pseudomonas and staph.
Okay.
And so that started a whole new set of problems.
So after the cardiac arrest, then you found out that you had a stroke. Tell me about your faith at that time.
That will really test your faith, because at that point, and I know he was talking to God. I asked him, I said, were you praying, were you talking to God? And he said, yeah, all the time. And even though he couldn't talk to us, and sometimes in our silence, our heart still speaks. So I know that he was talking with God, and I know I was talking with God. You know, there was a lot of lonely hours in the hospital room, and a lot of time to get really, really close to God and try to understand, you know, why. And we don't ever understand really why, but he has his reasons. Sometimes storms of life, they are not necessarily sent to devastate us. Sometimes they just clear a path. So at that point you go, okay, so we're going to take a different road. We're going to run a different road than what we're used to, because God knows that he had been on that road a lot of years. So it's just a different road that we take now.
What about you and how you handled it at that time? Did you have support around you, or were you by yourself? Or?
Well, I was at first by myself, because we went to the hospital by ourselves, and then things were happening so fast. But his brother came into town, Dennis, and I have family in Texas where we were, so they were there. But, you know, you're faced, like, and you know, because you worked ICU, you know what the emergency rooms, there are so many things that are coming at you so fast that you don't really know how you're going to respond, but you do know that God is there, and you lean on him, and he gives you the wisdom if you just listen. Because I sure didn't know what I was doing. You know, this was all new to me. We weren't given an instruction book for this.
Randy, Mary, your journey brought you back to Nashville, and you went into physical therapy. Tell me what those days were like after the stroke and you got out of the danger zone.
Well, getting out of the danger zone it seemed like we thought we were, and then something else would happen, and then something else happens. So as far as getting out of the danger zone, I don't think until the day we walked out of our final rehab at Baylor Hospital, Dallas, because we'd left Vanderbilt and went back to Dallas as soon as we could. But when we were walking out of that hospital, I say hotel lobby because we live there, the hospital lobby, and I had him in the wheelchair, and he had his arm up, one arm, and he was like, whee, you know, he was so happy. And that was a hallelujah moment for us, because they said that he was going to probably be hospital, you know, he'd be in and out of the hospital the rest of his life and probably bedridden. And I said, that's okay, but I don't believe it, you know, and we did not believe that. He had made it through so many impossible, miraculous moments in the last 6 months. And it's because God carried him through them, and I know he did, or else he wouldn't still be with us. And, you know, to God be the glory for all of that, because, you know, with doctor's wisdoms and his perseverance and his warrior spirit, and, you know, and I wasn't giving up either, and I was the doctor's worst nightmare. They were like, I wish she'd leave, but we'll keep him. But it was just, you know, it was just the two of us, and you know, it's one of those things that it can either tear you apart or it can bring you so much closer together. And I fell so madly in love with this man that was such a fighter laying in that bed.
You know, I love your dedication and your love, and I remember reading something that really touched me in your book, Forever and Ever, Amen, and it was about that. You know, you could have walked away. You could have just, you know, and you didn't. You ended up getting married.
Yes.
Tell me about that.
Oh, well, it was a couple of years after we got out of the hospital, and it was Christmas, and we had talked about it under the Christmas tree, and our daughter Kavanaugh had worked with him and asked him, or told him again, or they worked on how to ask me to marry him again, because, you know, we didn't know, it wasn't the same as it was in 2013, obviously. And so he did, right under the Christmas tree, and that was in December of 14, and so March of 15 we got married.
March of 15.
Yeah, real quietly. It was wonderful.
Beautiful.
So
it's a beautiful, you have a beautiful love story.
Yeah.
Let's talk about
Blessed.
what's coming up. You are still, you wrote the book Forever and Ever, Amen. It's out.
He wrote it with Ken Abraham, who was just absolutely amazing. He wrote the book having to put together, I call it scrambled eggs. He unscrambled scrambled eggs because he couldn't visit with Randy, I mean, as far as long conversations,
Right.
but he would go and learn facts, and he would bring those back to Randy and get confirmation. And Randy was always able to tell him yes or no, and so it was a beautiful project.
It's a wonderful book. Like I said before, I couldn't put it down. So what is God doing for you next? Where is He leading you now down to this journey? And what would you say to somebody that's going through what you are going through?
I think what I would say is just to always remember that the twig is never too far bent unless you give up, unless you lose your faith, unless you stop. Then it's too far bent. But you keep growing, you keep learning, you keep feeding your soul, you stay close to God, you keep Him in focus all the time. And God knows there's times when we have to lean on Him, when we need to lean on Him. And, you know, He never goes anywhere. He's right where we left Him. He's always there. And I don't think it's a sign of weakness to say that He's your strength. And, I mean, in our weakness is where His strength is made perfect. So I just don't ever give up. And not on each other and not on yourselves. Because, you know, the two of us we've enjoyed this journey. We really have. I mean, it's not what we would have designed. It's not what we had planned, but you know, what do we know about plans?
Let's talk about your new CD, Precious Memories, Worship and Faith.
Yes. That was actually done in a church in Florida. And years ago, and Bill Gaither was kind enough to bring those old gospel hymns back to the surface in Randy's voice. And it's a beautiful project and one of the heart, and so sweet of Bill Gaither to do that, to think enough of this man to say, okay, here's an all-time favorite. And we've talked to so many people, and they said, you know, I was raised in a church with those hymns, but you don't get to hear them anymore. And so they play those. They play them in the car, at home, on the radio. Just those take you back home. They take you down that warm road to home. So
when can we get the CD, or is it available?
They've been out. They've been out. Gosh. I don't even remember when they released. I wanted to say it was March of last year.
March of last year, okay.
I may be lying, maybe May, I don't know. But it's a beautiful project.
What's next? Anything? Do you have?
Lots of things. We have lots of plans. There's a documentary coming out about Randy. It's a 2-hour documentary that Warner's put together. Then there's also a new album. Well, it's not a new album. It's his oldest album, as a matter of fact, The Storms of Life. It's been remastered by Kyle Lenning, and 3 additional songs that Warner Music found in their vaults in Randy's voice that have never been heard. So those will be coming out in, that new album will be coming out in September, that new old album.
Well,
Storms of Life.
Storms of Life.
We've been through the storms
Yes.
of life.
Randy, Mary, thank you so much. You don't know how honored and blessed I am to sit down here and get to share your story. Thank you so
Well,
much.
Thank you for having us. We're very honored that you would have us. Thank you.
My friends, are you facing storms of life? Just remember that you can do all things through Christ who gives you strength, so that you can share your story of unshakable faith that will give Him honor and glory. This is today's Nashville. This is faith.
Cornerstone Television wishes to thank all our faithful viewers whose consistent prayers and financial support have made this program possible.